All right. So this begs the next question. If we want to make a materialized or non-materialized view, and I told you we were going to look at non-materialized views next, and we are, but first, let's look at how you actually create a view. What kind of syntax, what kind of black magic do I need to run in order to get this to work? And so the answer to that is fairly simple. What we want to do is we want to run the create view syntax, and we give it a name, and then we say as, and then we run the query right behind it. So you can pipe this syntax right here in front of every query that you've ever run, and you can give a specific view name. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that query that you're putting right here, and it's going to put it inside what we would call a non-materialized view. Views are the output of the query we ran. This is very important to remember. We're trying to be as basic as possible here. We're trying to kind of store what we ran. So views are the output of the query we ran. Also something to note, views act like tables, so you can query them. We've been in a couple of scenarios where we've ran a query and we can't quite get the entire answer out of it that we would like. For instance, with getting the current salary, which we solved with window functions. But when we ran that query and we got the last salary date, we really wished that we could have queried that and in some way derived the current salary by doing a filter. Well, here's the thing. Views act like tables, so when you create a view, you can query them, and that is the amazing part of views. And so with that, there is one third core principle that we want you to take away. Views take very little space to store. We only store the definition of a view, not all of the data that it returns. And this is true for a non-materialized view. When we talk about materialized views, we are storing the output of the data physically. Now, that being said, the majority of the time you will want to work with non-materialized views. There are some instances in which you may want to keep a materialized view around for whatever reason, performance reasons. You don't want to constantly have to rerun that query. You want it to update in the background because it's quite heavy or whatnot. There's many different reasons, but in the majority of cases, we are working with non-materialized views, and those take up very little space. Let me reiterate that, very little space. So don't be afraid of creating views. Now, updating a view. We saw how to create a view, but how do I update that view if I want to tweak the query a little bit or whatnot? Well, that's where we use the create or replace syntax. And we give it a view name. And if the view name exists, well, it'll either replace the query if the query you're writing is different, or it will create a completely new one. So that's an easy way to update a view. And then what if I want to rename my view? What if I come into this company, right? And let's just say that they have 1,000 views, but they don't have a consistent naming convention. And because of that inconsistent naming convention, when you come in, they're like, we really need to make this easier for us. And your first job is like, hey, can you rename all of these views? We came up with this naming convention. Well, then what's your answer going to be? I can rename views like a boss. I know the syntax. Alter view. Alter view allows you to alter a view name and rename it to another view name. So we're taking a view with an existing view name and we're able to rename it to something else. Now, of course, if you had to do this 1,000 times, it would be crazy. I'm just saying for the sake of an example that let's say you had to do this. It's a fairly straightforward, fairly easy syntax to use and comprehend. And so the last thing we're going to look at is deleting a view. What if you created a view and you're like, oh, that wasn't what I meant to keep around. Like you're cleaning out a database and there's all these views that are not useful at all. Well, the syntax is fairly easy. It's drop view. And you can optionally add the parameter if it exists. So you can kind of create multiple drops and you can say, hey, only drop it if it exists. If it doesn't exist, don't throw an error to me. I really don't care. It may or it may not exist. I'm not completely sure. So just drop it if it exists. Otherwise, don't make a big fuss out of it. And if you were to like have to drop 2, 3,000, 4,000 views, you could easily create a script that would generate the syntax and wouldn't fail if you were trying to drop views that didn't exist. Fairly easy, fairly straightforward. And so with looking at all of this syntax, what we've now mastered is the basics of creating views. So let's look at actually creating views and what that looks like. Let's try some things out.